Good morning, gents. Once again, I'm so glad to welcome you to our weekly podcast, in which we shed light on several interesting topics in energy sector, from oil, natural gas, energy transition, and renewables. In our today's podcast, we'll delve into the oil reserves in the United States and exactly the SPR, Strategic Petroleum Reserves. And that's why I have called my friend Brian Perry, founder of Energy Rogue from the United States. Good morning, Brian. I'm so thrilled to see you again.
Good morning, Chief. It's great to see you, especially after we went to the conference with Gulf Intelligence in Fujairah, and I really missed seeing you at ADIPEC and the other ones. But I'm hopeful that next year I can make them all.
Well,
So
the
um,
pleasure is
so
all mine. The pleasure is all mine, and hope to see you in other occasions for sure.
absolutely, absolutely. I
Exactly.
definitely I definitely want to come see you. So
Thank
thank
you
you
very
for
much.
having me.
Thank you. The pleasure is all mine. So, Brian, the SPR were first set by the ex-American President Ford in 1975. Its authorized capacity is 714 million barrels. This capacity is equivalent to the total consumption of the African continent for 5.5 months. So it's a huge amount, a huge volume of oil. So these reserves reached the peak value of 726 million barrels in 2010, but now they are at their lowest levels for decades. Actually, they are 389 million barrels.
Mhm.
As we know, in the wake of the Russian war with Ukraine, Biden's administration announced a release of 180 million barrels for 6 months in order to ensure a moderate price in the petrol stations. My question is, how was that release from the SPR beneficial to the US economy?
I'm so glad you gave the history of the SPR because that's actually an important context. When the SPR was created, there was a very big concern around energy, and specifically here in the United States, there was a lot of trade conflicts when it came to oil back in the 70s and into the 80s, and that created that created a lot of volatility for consumers. And I actually grew up during that time frame, and we could not fill up our car. There were only certain days that we could fill up our car. So we actually had very, we were very restricted on our consumption because of the price and because of how much we actually had. So the creation of that was to help stabilize a lot of that volatility. So the intent behind that was to provide a stable supply to where if there's things that happen, we draw on it. Now, if you go back to 1990, there's probably a period of time where we maybe drew down 50 million barrels or 20 million barrels. But the drawdown in 22 was the first time we have seen this massive, massive drawdown. And it was because of we had massive, massive inflation. Crude oil prices were rocketing higher, but actually everything else was rocketing higher on inflation that much more. So the crude oil that was drawn out was really meant to price stabilize. So the reason I bring that up is originally this was for security of oil supply and more as a strategic petroleum reserve to have that. What it's turned into with the growth of US supply now on crude oil since 2007, the crude oil markets or the crude oil production in the United States is a different animal. We used to only produce like 7 million
Seven
barrels a
million
day, and
barrels.
we're now up above 13.
Yeah.
So the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, I mean, you can do some simple math and say, well, there's 13 million barrels of crude oil production. There's 16 some odd of refining capacity. So that leaves about 3 million barrels. Well, we could get the rest probably from Canada and probably have our own ecosystem. It's not our refining infrastructure is actually built around a different quality of crude. So we can't quite think that way. And that's part of the reason that the US exports, say, 4 million barrels a day, but we import six. So, but back to your question. We drew that down in 2022, which did help relieve some price pressure,
Yeah.
especially in the United States. They are starting to add back to that, and they had to seek special approvals to draw down this much that quick. So this was a very unique circumstance, and they're by December they will have added back 40 million barrels of the 180.
Yeah. That's great. We see how the release really helped the Americans to have access to very cheap, let's say, a moderate oil price in the station. And really, I think that was a great job has been done by Biden's administration by releasing. But everybody was talking about that release. It could be a strategic and should not touch it. But at the end of the day, it helped really oil prices to drop in the US. That will drive me to the next question, Brian. Let's say the US SPR at the moment at their lowest level since 1983.
Right.
My question is, how can the Trump's administration balance between the fill-up of the strategic reserves and the risk of high oil prices locally and internationally as a result of orientating some volumes to the storage?
Well, I think there's going to be two things at play. Number one, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is now used as a financial instrument. And in other words, it was originally designed for energy security, and it's been used as an economic instrument. So that the reason that it was built and the reason that we have it is different from how we're using it today. We're using it more for economics. So there are rules that say we need to start filling back, and we're supposed to fill it back. However, I think with a Trump presidency, I think it's going to be dependent on the price. If we stay low at this price, we may add some back to the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. But realistically, if they don't, there's a lot of price risk that the United States is incurring by not refilling it now. So, I mean, there's a potential that crude oil prices could drop, but I see much more opportunity for a growth of the price. And once the price starts going up, you're going to see the administration, you're going to see all the policymakers really drag their feet on trying to fill it back up because it's going to be more expensive.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I see that like the American administration was not really in a rush to fill up quickly the SPR. And we see like we touched that the US elected president Trump has appointed the CEO of service company called Liberty Energy. His name is Chris Bright. He's known with his fracking policies, fracking strategy and activities in the United States. And that's the question is, I think it's like Donald Trump is really sure at the moment, even Biden, they were like sure the United States will reach to the autonomy of oil production or natural, as they did with natural gas. They were net importers, and at the moment they are the exporters and the biggest LNG exporters in the world. And they
right.
think that they are confident that they one day they will reach their autonomy of producing oil. So,
Mm.
do you believe that we are going to see more fracking and some more oil and gas in the market in the upcoming years from the United States? Time the OPEC Plus still struggling with cuts to stabilize the market.
So, so a couple of things. So the first one is that we actually just discussed this on a recent. One of our members was actually asking about this. They said, "Well, with the Trump policy of a tagline that he had during his first presidency in 2016 was 'Drill, baby, drill.' That was very popular. It got very popular, and so." the US during that time, so Trump took office in 2017. By 2019, the US had grown by 3 million barrels a day of crude oil production. However, it had nothing to do with Trump's policies, regulations, or any of that. It had to do with Permian production in the United States, which contributed probably close to 1.8 million barrels a day of that three. And that had nothing to do with the policies because the regulations that were relaxed under the Trump administration were on a pipeline out of Canada and opening up access to drilling in Alaska and opening up access to drilling in offshore. None of those three things did anything for production. So the last policy example that we had in the first Trump presidency was a relaxation of overarching oil and gas friendly policies. However, it did nothing to production. It was coincidental in nature because it had to do with the technology. They were getting better at it. And it had to do with the owners of the Permian needed to prove that up. So what's different now is with you've got Chris Wright, you've got Trump. They want friendly policies. However, what I really argue or say is that if you look at prices today, Brent 72, WTI around 69, 70, something somewhere around that level. Policy, if they relax federal policies on it very aggressively, if they relax those and just say go after it, that maybe hits the actual returns for the production at maybe $3 a barrel, something like that.
Mhm.
So now you can think about it. Well, this summer we were $15 a barrel higher, and we didn't add really rigs or economic interests to expand. So what that tells me is we're in a different inflection point. We're not going to see the same production response that we did in the 2017 to 2019 period because number one, the owners in the Permian, which were the largest productive basin in the United States, are different. They used to be
How they are different?
so they used to be independent companies that owned the resource and they wanted to prove it up. So they had one asset. So that meant their choice was either to drill that well or not drill.
Mhm.
That that's it. That's the only choice they could make. They could drill a well or they could not drill.
Mhm.
That was their only choice because they were single basin operator. Now what's happened is Exxon, Chevron, Oxy, Occidental, these companies have come in and acquired via mergers, at Exxon and Pioneer, and you've got these mega mergers. Now you have multinational interests that own that resource. Their choice is, do I drill a Permian well or do I work on a project in Algeria? Do I work on seriously? I
Yeah, yeah.
mean, it opens up a different lens to where now the economic return is compared to other, not only other basins, but other areas, other countries, and there may be better countries that attract the capital. So you're not going to see as much capital deployment in the Permian. And the second thing is the resource itself is not quite as productive as it once was. The raw numbers show large volumes coming out. However, they are drilling longer laterals to get there, which means their drilling expense has increased. Their production numbers have increased, but their expense has increased as well. And so the economics, and again, I go back to we were $15 higher and we didn't see expansion. So if we didn't see expansion, that tells me it's a price signal question. It's not a policy question. So that's just my 2 cents. I
Yeah, yeah,
could be
yeah.
wrong.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
could be wrong as always.
Yeah, I know. I really agree with you because in October 23, the US production was 13.2 million barrels per day.
Right.
Today they are 13.2.25. So there's a flood in production in 1 year. And I went through many documents, many articles saying that we have seen that number of rigs decreased in the US. It keeps dropping the number of rigs. And I think that I agree with you when you say that the production, let's say, it's not really cost efficient at the moment in the United States. They spend too much money and they are not getting the volumes of oil and gas they are looking for. So I think this is the big issue. So we agree that when you have policy to drill, you want to drill too much, you increase the drilling, let's say the increase the drilling rigs numbers, but doesn't mean that you will find the volumes you are looking forward. So we totally agree about that. So allow me to go to the last question topic of today's, and is amid the global economic crisis and weak demand in China, the United States will certainly increase its oil production to meet the local needs, as it did with natural gas. So do you think that United States will follow up the same scenario of natural gas, as it became the biggest exporter of LNG in the world in a very short time? So we are going to this question.
So, so let's think about that. The natural gas. Okay, when we talk about the Permian, I'm going to get a little geeky for a second. So when you look at productive basins in the United States, you have basins that are gas-only basins, and then you have gas that are oil basins, and then you have gas or natural
Associated.
gas.
Yeah.
Associated gas. So you have associated gas in oil plays, and then you have pure gas, which is deep, high
Dry.
pressure, dry gas.
Yeah.
And then you have somewhere in between some places that are liquids rich. So they're not quite oil, but they have a lot of natural gas liquids in them. So they have things like propanes, butanes, and natural gasoline, those type of elements inside of it. When you look at the United States, the gorilla, the big gorilla in the room has been the Permian. And when you look at the United States, gas growth has come from the Permian. Now, the Permian is situated in a place that doesn't need a lot of extra gas. So they've had to build a lot of pipelines when it comes out of the Permian. And that is some of the crude oil expansion there. Most of those pipelines have been built and are online. There's a few more proposals in play. So here's where you get to the interrelationship. The gas only basins in the United States probably need a $4.50 Henry Hub price to really start producing.
And they are not the case today. They are 1.85, 86, I believe. That's
Exactly.
not really cost efficient for the producers.
Right. And so now what's different, the reason Permian has been adding, these other basins have not. They've been in decline. So when you look holistically, it's kind of like the oil. We're treading water, but that means some places we're growing, some places we're shrinking. Permian has been where we keep growing on natural gas, but one of the things that that I look at when I look at the Permian and when you look at natural gas production is that natural gas in those basins has been actually negative for the last couple months. It just turned positive this week, but it's been negative, meaning that the oil producers, they could not produce without disposing of the gas. So they were paying somebody to get rid of the gas so that they could produce oil. So it's an interesting dynamic. We have enough gas to feed. We're going to have about. We're currently exporting about 14 BCF a day on LNG exports.
14.
We're 14.
Yeah.
And we're about to expand another 5 BCF, and this is going to come from Plaquemines, from Calcasieu, Those are Louisiana names, and they,
Yeah.
they're hard to spell and hard to say. So you got to spend some time in Louisiana and get a little what they call
Hmm.
Cajun pronunciation. So Plaquemines, Calcasieu, Golden Pass is another one. That is actually a joint venture between Exxon and Qatar. So, and then the last one is going to be an expansion of the Corpus Christi facility that's already in operation. When you look at those and you add that up, we are looking at probably another 5 BCF a day of exports that are coming, 5 to 7 BCF a day that are coming within the next 12 months.
Uh, 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 uh,
Scheduled.
yeah. Why you are not expecting that the increase of production will come from Permian Basin?
Mainly pipeline related. In other words, it's so far away, and the pipeline infrastructure is pretty much full, so it doesn't have too much. Right now, the Permian is going south to Mexico. It's going and it's going southeast over to the Texas LNG exports in Corpus Christi, Freeport and Sabine Pass, but the Permian has so much gas that it's actually pushing a lot of molecules north. It's finding any way out because it there's just not enough pipeline capacity. So the problem is, as we're increasing the capacity down on the Gulf Coast,
Mhm.
the Permian gas is there's no more capacity down to the Gulf Coast. They got to go north. So it's going to be indirect if those molecules get to the Gulf Coast. So that's really the puzzle that I have in mind. I think out of the 5 to 7 BCF a day of incremental capacity that we're going to have, because of international LNG markets and the regasification, then the pacing of ships and regasifications, because as the US has been building this out, because again, 10 years ago, we weren't even exporting.
Yeah.
And now we're one of the largest. And so
The
we
largest,
can't,
the
yeah.
largest LNG exporter at the moment is the United States.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
It, well, yeah, I'll go one step further. So Cheeb, I was hired in 2004, 20 years ago at Chevron. And I said, well, why you want to hire me to buy natural gas supply in the United States? And they said, yes. And I said, why? And they said, well, we're going to be importing natural gas for the next 20 years, for the next
Whoa.
50 years. We're going to be importing. The Wall Street and Chevron and Exxon were spending billions of dollars on import facilities. The first export facility of the United States was actually built as an import. They spent all the money reversing it because what they realized was with the shale revolution, oh wait, we we actually have the gas.
Oh
We
yeah,
don't
yeah.
well, like we were expecting that we were going to be importing, and then we were like, wait a second, we have the gas, so we should export. So, and I think I looked in 2016, we were exporting half a BCF a day. Today we're up to 14. By the end of 25, we're going to be up over 20 BCF a day. I don't think all of that is going to be filled, and that's because of capacity constraints on the regasification side. And the three biggest exporters are going to be Qatar, Australia, and the United
Australia.
States. And but I'm thinking because you guys could export a lot, couldn't you? You guys,
Oh yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
you guys have a lot of resource there, don't you?
Yeah, let me remind everybody that Algeria owns, let's say, holds the third biggest reserves of shale gas in the world. And I
Yeah.
think that Algeria National Oil Company, Sonatrach, in last October just signed MOUs with Chevron and ExxonMobil, maybe to explore, maybe I don't know, to study feasibility to explore the reserves in Algeria. And I think I strongly believe that many regions in the world, especially in Algeria, we have a lot of reserves of natural gas. But the
Hmm.
problem how can we produce that natural gas and will be cost efficient? This is the
R-
big question. So
Right.
it's like and you have thousands, let's say tons of gold, but to access to that, to explore that gold will be very expensive than your gold. So that's a big problem. We have a lot of reserves, but I think we have a lot of things to work on. We need to work on the fracking equipment. So
Hmm.
I think that Liberty Energy, the company, yes, Liberty is working a lot, and I went through their website. They are doing a very great job in fracking. So the problem is fracking equipment, the cost and the sand for fracking. So we need to produce it locally. Without
Right.
that, we cannot really exploit that natural gas, but will be very expensive at the end of the day. And I think we need technology. So these companies, service companies and operators, I believe they have some technology at the moment.
Hmm.
And so I think we have a lot of things to do, and we need to work seriously on this because we have a lot of reserves. We have the market. We have a European market is very close to us. So I think there is a potential, but we need to work on many things at once. And I strongly believe that one day Algeria will be one of the biggest exporters. It's at the moment one of the biggest exporters of natural gas in the world, but not that really high volume because the United States at the moment is producing like 10 times more that Algeria is producing in kind of natural gas.
Right.
Uh, yeah, so I believe even Algeria has more reserves compared to the United States. So I think what allowed the United States to be a net exporter of LNG in a very short time is the access to the technology and that
Mm.
technology, and they succeeded to reduce the cost of production in a very short time. So
Right.
technology, I think, and the United States said, we have a lot of many service companies. So here we have just a few service companies, but US we have hundreds and maybe thousands of service companies that created like let's say competition and
Right.
competition, let's say constructive competition. So constructive competition all time creates value to the economy, and that's why we have seen that boom, that revolution of shale in the United States. And I think the United States, it's like a very good a case study for us. We have to learn
Hmm.
a lot from the United States, how in a very short time, let's say 10 years, 15 years, they became the biggest producers of natural gas in the world and the biggest exporter of energy in the world. And I think this approach with national oil companies Sonatrach and ExxonMobil and Oxy and Chevron will be really, let's say, added value to the local economy to explore the available and high potential of natural gas available in the country. So
Right.
once again, I have to thank you so much, my dear friend Brian, and I hopefully to see you in very, very soon.